Welcome here this morning. Firstly, let me introduce myself a little bit. My name is David Mullen. I'm the founder and managing director of Engineering Documentation Limited. It was a company that we founded back in 2006, and the idea initially was to produce documentation, obviously by the name, and drawings for the building industry. So I suppose where we started, I had a background as working with a mechanical contractor, and I'm a mechanical engineer by qualification. So where I started was coming onto the sites. I was finding that there was a discrepancy between the handover documentation that the client was receiving at the end of a job and what was actually happening on the sites. So I had this fanciful idea, I suppose, of trying to match the drawings and the documentation to the site and make it relevant. And the way that I did that was spending time on site, walking down the lines, talking to the plumbers, talking to the fitters, talking to the electricians, finding out what was going where, and making sure then that we reflected that on the as-built drawing. And it seems, we were speaking about it last night, and it seems something that's very obvious, and a certain amount of sniggers tend to come. But when we look back at the legacy documentation for old buildings in the country here, at hospitals, at universities, and you look at the building documentation, sometimes it's very obvious to see it's an engineer's drawing with an as-built stamp on it, and it doesn't have the credibility. So I suppose that's what I was trying to bring when we set up the company initially. By virtue of the fact, I suppose, drawing was my thing. When I was at school, I had a really good technical drawing teacher, and we used to mitch off some of the other classes and go down the back of his class, and he'd give us exercises to do. And there was 4 or 5 of us in the class, and we all came out with our A1s, and so we were all very proud of it. But drawing was something that I liked more than any other subject. By virtue of that fact, by virtue of the fact that we were working with mechanical and electrical contractors mainly, and I suppose by virtue of the fact that the guys we were working with knew that we were not afraid of going on sites, our work requests started changing from just the handover documentation and drawings to, well, maybe you could do the coordination drawings. Can you do a set of as-builts? Can you do a set-out drawing? Maybe you can do a section for us. So slowly we started moving into the world away from the documentation and into the drawings. And then just as things were getting up and running, we set up in 2006. We were, I suppose, coming off the end of the boom, and the boom went boom, and we ended up in the bust. And we ended up having to reinvent ourselves to a certain extent and scramble to make ourselves a little bit more relevant. And that's where we started getting into the whole BIM sphere. And at the time, Bobby is down there today, and Bobby will speak well for his own company, but we were probably in a similar situation at the time in terms of the markets that we were looking at. And I think it's testament to, I suppose, the innovation and perseverance that was around back then, that there's a lot of familiar faces around here today of companies that were in one space and have reinvented themselves and gone on to another space. What we did, I suppose, was very simply, rather than laying off guys straight away, because naively we didn't know how long this was going to go on for, but we put time into research and development and experimentation, probably for the first time consciously in the business. And we started looking at something very simple, a boiler house. It was mechanical and electrical stuff we were into, and it was 2D CAD we were using at the time. And how does one represent a boiler house? You have a flow header, you have a return header right on top of it, you have circuits coming up, you have valves and fittings on the vertical as well as on the horizontal, and you've got pipes going left, right, and everywhere. How do you represent that on a 2D drawing for someone to install on site? Fair enough, you can do it as a P&ID or a schematic, but in terms of a layout drawing, how do we address that? And that's where we started. And we started experimenting around with different softwares. One of the lads came to me and he said, "Dave, I found this Revit thing. Maybe we should look at it." And we looked at it, and we found it could do what we wanted. Now, at this stage, we're in 2D CAD. We're completely ignorant of BIM and everything that we're going to be talking about here today. Not in a bad way, but just we were looking at things independently and individually, and we were finding things that would work for us and finding things that would work for our client, and we were trying to put them all together. So we got ourselves trained up in Revit back in 2009. And again, testament to who's here today, it was Ralph and Pat that got their guys to come down and down to our office in Sligo and train us up. And I suppose that was where we started getting into the BIM end of things. And now most of our work, 90% of our work, is mechanical and electrical coordination for sites, for building sites in Ireland and in Europe. So back to today, when I was starting thinking about what was I going to do my presentation on, obviously I don't have a presentation as such. And I had a few ideas going around in my head, and that was more of laziness than anything last week, but sure, you'll have that. I had a few ideas going around in my head, and we're in the Technology and Practice Lounge, so that was going to guide me to a certain extent. But of all the technologies we use, we're using technology every day of the week, from 8 in the morning until 5 in the evening. Some of the technology that we use, we don't even class it as technology. It's just the way we do things, and we don't recognise it as such. Balancing that, I have a counter melody going on in the back of my head of a couple of conversations I've had outside of work in the previous weeks. One of them was with my wife, both about technology. One of them was with my wife, who had brought her sister and her sister's friend to the cinema. Very simple task. The sister and the sister's friend, early 30s, I think, both with Down syndrome. So limited in terms of ability, but both reasonably independent in their own way, if what they're looking for is directly in their interest, if you know what I mean. Well able to go into the cinema and say, okay, I want to go and see James Bond, I want a packet of that, I want a bottle of that, and they can organise themselves. But the 3 girls went into the cinema, and they've all these big screens in it, and the 2 young girls were lost. They didn't know what to do, because that particular type of technology had left them behind. The second one was, not surprisingly, my own parents having a problem with technology, and they wanted to book up a show up the road in a month's time. And they'd managed to do the hotel part of it, fair enough. But they got to booking the tickets, and the old lad said, listen, Dave, will you look after me with this? I'm just not 100% on what I'm doing here. So right enough, we sat down, we booked up the tickets, got the right show, got the right day, did 6 seats, got them all in a line. Everything was perfect. Went to pay, put in the details, put in the credit card, paid for it, approved it on the app on the phone, email came out, tickets in it. Can you print the tickets for me? No, we can't, because they were phone-only tickets. So I said, listen, Dad, you're going to have to get an app on your phone. We'll organise it, and you show that at the door, and everyone gets in. And straight away, there's a problem. You can see the panic starting to build. So I said, look, give us your phone. We'll put the app on it. What's your password for the iStore? He hadn't a clue. So there's 2 situations there where there's a technology that has alienated, or at least scared off people from using a service that they would be well able to use. And we're coming, remember, off 2 years where we've been always asked to look out for the elderly and look out for the marginalised. So that brings us on, I suppose, to the type of skills that we have available in our industry, and we have to be mindful to bring everybody along with us. So back to the site, back to the building site, and back to what we're here for today, the coordinator. The coordinator's role on a site, it's not a flashy role, and it's not something that should be noticed. A coordinator, like a group of musicians, the ear shouldn't be drawn by the backing, the guy that's playing the backing. The eye shouldn't be drawn by the coordination process, and it certainly shouldn't be drawn by the coordinator. If the coordination becomes the focal point of the project, I think we've got a major problem. The aim of the coordinator should be not to create work that will catch the eye, because we've plenty of trades that are paid for that and that are good at that and that will do it. Rather, we should keep things simple, keep the drawings simple to read, the routes simple to construct, and the systems simple to maintain after the handover. As a coordinator, we have to support the contractors on the site to ensure the job runs smoothly and efficiently, and it's here that we can use our technology. Not so much to replace the human input or to scare people away on the site, but to enhance our own output, to improve our workflows, to increase our productivity and our reliability. But we need to remember where our end goal is, and we're still in the present. To take a very simplistic perspective, and maybe a stereotype of a BIM coordinator, it can be pigeonholed into the role of clash detection. 2 items can't occupy a single space. Fair enough. We all know the coordinator's role is more than that. Our aim is to avoid clashes happening in the first place, to simplify complex routing, to ensure all the elements of the project can be installed safely and maintained efficiently. How many times have we had a model that's clash-free, and it comes into us, and we look up and the cable tray is just below the ceiling slab, the pipes are over here, they're all about the place. There's no clashes in it. But the electrician is going to say, Dave, I can't get my hand over that cable tray to pull cables. And the mechanical contractor is going to say, Dave, How are we supposed to hang that? We have a pipe here, we have a pipe there. How am I going to put a bracket in there? What am I going to hang the bracket on? That's the role of the coordinator. And then once we get past the installation stage, we need to make sure that at least the critical elements, the valves, the fire dampers, the VCDs, that we can access them, that we can commission them, and that we can maintain them down the line. Once that's done, our job then is to communicate this with the site team. And in my opinion, that's where the real skill of a good coordinator will come into being. Because it's not enough to say, I've stripped the model, it's a Friday evening, I've uploaded it to the common data environment, I'm off for a jar, see you on Monday. That's not acceptable. In my view, it's very important that the coordinator can communicate everything that's done in the 3D space and represent that on the drawings that are going to the guys on the ground on the site on the Monday morning, because we're still dealing with drawings on the site. When we come in, and it's important to come into exhibitions like this, we're going to see 3D glasses, we're going to see point cloud scanning, we're going to see all elements of technology. But if I bring you onto a site in the morning and we go down to the site compound, there's going to be a couple of A-note drawings pinned up, and that's where the guys are going to get their information of where to hang their brackets in in the majority of the projects in this in this country. So clear site drawings are the primary output, and it's imperative, I suppose, that when we're delivering the 2D drawings, that we make sure that everything that we've done in the 3D space is represented from the critical dimensions and annotations, and that they're all incorporated into that. And we can use our technology in the background to achieve that. But when we get down onto the site, we have to remember who we're dealing with and the level of, I suppose, their technical competence and their BIM competence that we're dealing with. So we need to make sure that we use our technology judiciously and effectively. I don't want to come in here as a Luddite and say we should avoid technology, but I'm saying we should be careful where we use technology and not use it just for the sake of using it. The balance of skills in our industry is such that we have guys working on computers from one end of the day to the next, and we have guys working on sites who dread going home and opening up the laptop for fear of what they might come out of the computer. Our industry is an old industry. It's a traditional type of industry, one that has probably limited change in terms of workflows. Okay, we've had advanced machinery and advanced equipment, but in terms of the overall disruption to the norm, it maybe has been fairly limited over the years. We're still building brick upon brick. So when we talk about the introduction of BIM, it's a forced change to that industry that people have to adapt to and reshape to. New roles have come out of it. The BIM coordinator, the task team manager, the information manager, all roles that we have of, let's say, the IT guy. You know, you'd ring him up, Brian, my printer isn't working, or I've lost my password, or now we're ringing him up and we're asking him to write programs and macros to do jobs within the BIM model, to schedule things, to put in builders' work scopes. So everything has evolved, and it's evolving very, very quickly. So even the last 2 years, the concept of online meetings, something 3 years ago was completely foreign to me. Everybody was pushed into it 2 years ago with the COVID. And there was a bit of a novelty value. There was certainly on my part, a sense of resentment to it after that. And then we've come to accept it as business as usual, a technology that we don't class as technology. But we must be careful how we use it, and we must be careful to remember that end goal. The site is where our drawings are going, and we can't be removed too far from the site, because the old adage that we have is the guy with the experience that's on the site doesn't have the skills. And these guys are coming in now and they're getting trained, and that's great because we can deal with that. If we have the attitude and the will and desire to get trained, we can deal with it. But the younger guys and girls that are coming out of the college who have a certain amount of the skills, because there is still a gap between academia and industry, but they have a certain amount of the skills, but they're lacking the experience, and there's no fast way, there's no shortcut to giving these guys the experience. They have to earn it, and they have to earn it on the site. So as a company working in an industry which is undergoing rapid change, both in terms of process and technology, it has been a mainstay of ourselves to set ourselves up as a learning company. Because remember, until recently, there was no direct route into the job that we're doing now. The process is relatively in its infancy, both in terms of deployment and technology, and it's consistently evolving and developing. So for us to try and remain on that leading edge, it requires not just a competent team behind it, but a team that's dynamic and hungry, and a team that's brave enough to lead rather than just to follow, a team that's not afraid to make mistakes. Because we have a new workflow, a new software, a new process, maybe an old process with a new set of eyes every day. And for us, a good adage or a good motto is every day is a learning day. And we keep experimenting. We've experimented with point cloud technology right back at the very start when we started getting into BIM. We said we're in or we're out. And we bought a point cloud scanner that we probably couldn't afford at the time, but it got us moving in the right direction. We've taken in drone technology. 2 years ago, we got certified for the ISO 19650, which is something that I'm very, very proud of as a company, that we've achieved that benchmark. We've purchased different hardware, softwares. Some of them have worked, some of them haven't. We've kept what's good, we've got rid of what's bad. We're lucky enough that we're a young and dynamic company that have staff that are hungry, that not only want to try these things, but demand it. Even from a simple point of view of keeping themselves interacted and keeping themselves interested in the day-to-day. Because nobody wants to come into work and do the same thing every day. So learning is a key element of our business. Training is a key element, bringing raw talent in and training them up to be something special. And to do that, again, we go back, we can't lose fact that our end goal here is the site. So when we bring people in and train them, we have to make sure that the balance between the office experience and the technical experience is matched by that on the site. When we're doing a job for someone, I'm confident that all of my BIM leads know what a site looks like, know what it smells like, know what it feels like. They can talk the language of the guys on the ground. And to me, that's very important. But we need to make sure that we pass that on to the younger generation that's coming through. So, as well, I suppose feeding into that, these guys have to go out and experience the site. They have to experience talking to the guys on site, asking the silly questions. Why is that going that way? Why is that cable going over there? Why is that pipe going there? Why didn't you do it that way? Because that's the way that we're going to learn. And it's this communication that will foster these relationships. I think when BIM started taking a foothold in the country first, we hailed it as a process, as something that was going to answer our communication, that was improving communication right the way across. But we need to make sure that we don't just rely on the common data environment to do this, because the old-fashioned skills of talking and spending time with people and understanding people, that's what makes the good coordinator. Someone that's open to the new technologies, but isn't afraid of maintaining the old links or the old skills. So I suppose in conclusion, to finish on that note, and as we get back to these in-person events here today, it's good to remember, and it's good to chat. Mightn't be easy because we're all a little bit rusty. We've been out of this for 2 years, so going up to someone and saying hello isn't maybe the simplest thing. But give it a go today, because I think communication, it's the key for us that will open all of the doors to let everything else happen. And as part of the presentation or non-presentation, I was asked to come up with 5 learning points. And my learning points were: number 1, keep it simple. Number 2, maintain an open mind to workflows and technologies. 3, be mindful of others and their awareness of the BIM process and where they are at what point in time. 4, always be learning. And 5, keep talking. So enjoy today. Hope it's a good one. And we're over at Booth